My name is Aisha Allen. I am the second vice president with Realtors of Fresno County, and we are excited about this legislative roundtable that we're getting ready to have. We would like to thank all of our speakers for being present today and contributing to this conversation, as it is an important topic that we will continue to have. So today, as we get started, we will have we will begin with our president, who will introduce our speakers shortly. We'll have our chaplain, Mitch Shaw, have an opening prayer. We'll start our panel discussion with our panelists, and then we will close out with our future events and our closing prayers. So let us get started. This here is our leadership team. Without this team here, we could not be able to put such amazing events together, as we are all busy working on the back end of things, making sure that everything comes together quite nicely. So I'd like to thank our leadership team for absolutely everything that they contribute to this organization. Our sponsors, of course, we can't do it without you. Thank you so much for Union Bank, Bank of the West, and Universal Lending. Thank you for your contributions. We just had our backpack drive, and it's because of your help that we were able to complete this. And we'll share a little bit more about that backpack drive a little bit later. So I'm going to hand it over to our president, Lionel.
Thank you so very much, Aisha. Thank you very much for opening up this event. We're very elated to have this event, to have such a great group of panelists on this call. I want to start with Dr. Amber Crowell. If you don't mind, could you introduce yourself a little bit and give us a brief background about your career so far at this point?
Yes, hi. Sorry, I've had to relocate outside. If y'all aren't aware, Fresno State is still working from home. And so I am at home with my husband also working from home, and there's just a lot of noise right now. So I'm an assistant professor of sociology at Fresno State. I'm also the regional housing coordinator for Faith in the Valley. If you're not familiar with them, they're a grassroots community coalition who are based in Fresno and other counties throughout the San Joaquin Valley and do a lot of community advocacy. And my research is in the areas of residential segregation, social inequality, housing. And so that's where my work in the community really intersects with my academic work. And also demography. So I do a lot of population studies and analyze spatial distributions of populations. So I came to Fresno in 2016. So I'm coming up on 5 years as a Fresno resident. I came from Texas. So it's a pretty big jump for me, but I feel like I'm finally pretty embedded in the city and calling this my forever home. So I'm happy to talk to you all today and share a little bit about what I've learned since I've arrived here.
Thank you so much for your introduction, Dr. Crowell. We're really excited to have you on. And then I want to go ahead and move over to Michael Jackson, MJ, Vice President, Senior Diverse Markets Manager. MJ, could you give us a little introduction about yourself, please?
Yes, thank you, Lionel. Good afternoon, Realtors. Good afternoon, everyone on the call today and in the meeting today. My name is Michael Jackson. I am the Senior Diverse Markets Manager for MUFG Union Bank. Work under our Corporate Social Responsibility Unit, and we'll go a little bit more in detail on what that all means to everyone on the call today. But mainly, we support our nonprofit channels, our government agencies, as well as our trade organizations to increase homeownership, but also to work on homeownership opportunities in those specific marketplaces. So with that said, thank you for having me on today's call.
Thank you so very much. And then, of course, the man of the hour, Mr. Matthew Grundy, or Deputy Mayor. Mr. Grundy, please give us a little introduction about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Lionel. Yeah, as mentioned, my name is Matthew Grundy. Good afternoon, all. Thanks for joining this virtual meeting. I have the good fortune of serving you all as the Deputy Mayor for the city of Fresno. I just came to Fresno 5 years ago, believe it or not. I'm a Southern California kid, but came here and was able to lead Habitat for Humanity Greater Fresno area as its CEO, and had a good time doing that. Also founded the Central California Community Land Trust, and enjoyed that work. when I arrived, I was met with a lot of cynicism from Fresnans, saying, why would you move here? And I looked around with a developer eye and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. This place is amazing. And, I fell in love instantly with the Valley and with Fresno in particular, because I believe people make the place. And so I want to thank you all because you are amazing people. I want to tip my hat to you that I'm not wearing, just to say thank you for making this place home to myself, my wife, our 6 kids. We love Fresno and are biggest cheerleaders for Fresno that you can imagine, because the Valley is an amazing place to be. I joined Mayor Dyer and his administration just 100 days ago, and we're off and running. We shared a little bit about it in the past, but the vision for One Fresno and seeing it come to fruition through 6 priorities is really the plan of attack right now. We're doing it collaboratively, communally, and so look forward today to sharing more and learning more about you all and the great work that the Realtists are doing here in Fresno. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you, Lionel, for introducing our amazing speakers. Before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to our chaplain so that he can get us beginning with the opening prayer.
Good afternoon. Those that will, just pray with us. God, we're thankful for this time together. We don't take for granted that we just gathered on our own. So we give you honor and praise for everything. We thank you for this opportunity to share information that will help people that you care about, the underserved. So I just ask that you would equip and bless each of these amazing speakers, not just professionally with what they're going to impart to us, God, but personally, God, for things that they may be going through, God. They pour out so much to so many. God, just fill them up with all that they so freely give to your people. So I declare that the information that goes out today, that it would be plain, that it would be received well, and more than anything, that it would have action taken on behalf of it. So again, we're thankful for being here today and for all that's going to take place. In the name of your son, Jesus, amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. It always sets the mood off right, gets the pace set and you're ready to go. So you start good. So actually, we are going to have you also, Lionel, you want to tell us a little bit about the Sheba report right before he reads this?
Yeah, absolutely. So those of you who are not familiar with the organization, obviously NARAB is the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. And with that, we'd like to start, obviously since it's a legislative event, we'd like to start off by having a quote read by our chaplain, Mr. Mitch Shaw. And this kind of sets the tone, sets the tone a little bit about the discussions today and why this organization is so important to our community and really nationwide. So this is the Sheba report. The Sheba report is the state of housing in Black America. It is a report that is generated by NARAB, and it is strictly based on facts. So with that, I want to go and pass this over to Mr. Shaw.
This reads, disparities in homeownership and access to credit, they continue to cumulative wealth inequality. Black homeownership was 47% in 2020 and is yet to reach pre-2008 crisis levels. According to the U.S. Census Bureau in 2019, this is 2019, the homeownership rate for Blacks was 42.1%. It was 47.5% for Latinx and 73.4% for white household. Now, the census estimates for the second quarter of the 2020 report, this is a year later, that Black ownership has decreased to 47%, and then the non-Hispanic white homeownership has increased to 76%. The Black-white homeownership gap in 2020 was 26 percentage points. Now think about this. This is only slightly lower than the 26.8 percentage point gap that it was in 1960, which was before the passage of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. Blacks are underrepresented as homeowners. The proportion of new Black home buyers is less than half of the proportion of Black households in the US, which is 13%.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Shaw, for that. And then I'll go ahead and let our moderator, second VP Aisha Allen, take over.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the conversation. So we would like to begin with Dr. Amber Crowell. If you can share with us a little bit about your research and some of what you've discussed with us already in our previous conversations, but more about what we'd like to hear.
Yeah, so a lot of my research that's Fresno focused is really examining what we call the divide. Some people call it the North-South divide, or we just call it the social divide. But what we do know about Fresno, what anyone can see if you're driving up and down Blackstone or going up and down the 41, is that there's a very clear North-South divide. And this is in terms of race, this is in terms of class, this is in terms of how we stereotype neighborhoods. And it also has to do with a lot of social outcomes that we care about, like health and education. And so that became my local focus on with my research. Because I study segregation, that was obviously the first place I started, by looking at the formation of neighborhoods in Fresno. And so for me, that starts with mapping out what Fresno currently looks like with census data. And then I started digging into the history. So I don't know if you want me to move into that. I can go ahead and do that now if you'd like, because it's really important to recognize. Of course, yes, absolutely. It's important to recognize how Fresno's dividing lines, so north-south of Shaw, or in the most recent decade, north-south of Herndon, right? When I moved to Fresno, we were looking for homes. We flew in from Texas to look for homes, and we actually had somebody tell us, once they saw my white husband and knew that I was coming as a professor, you really want to look at houses north of Herndon. I didn't know what that meant at the time. Now I do. And so it's important to understand that those dividing lines are historically embedded, and that while the formation of them can be traced back to specific moments that I'm going to talk about, the reinforcement of them is more diffuse now. So there are a lot of different factors that go into holding those lines in place, to the point that we really can't point to any one specific thing anymore that's causing it. We can point to those specific moments 100 years ago, but it's diffuse since then. So now we have to understand these interlocking dynamics at individual and structural levels that reinforce those lines. So I'll start with a little history first. So I just want to make sure I can share my screen now. Great, thank you so much. So some of the key moments that we tend to, of course, I brought my slides. I'm an educator, that's what we do. Some of the key moments that we tend to point to in Fresno history is first the formation of Chinatown. So if you're unfamiliar with Chinatown, you know what Chinatown is today. If you live in Fresno, you know the area. Historically, it earned its name because it was where migrant workers, primarily from China, were segregated in the city. It eventually became the vice district of the city, and all that came with that. So the undervaluing of the area. So a lot of people are tempted to talk about the redlining maps, and I'll talk about those too, and point to that as like the segregating moment. But we actually have to go back further to the story of Chinatown and the way that the city was zoned at the time. So actually a good starting point is the 1918 General Plan, because the 1918 General Plan is what zoned that Chinatown area for industrial use, which, if you have been paying attention to the conversations today about Southwest Fresno and trying to deindustrialize that region, that is this history, right? So that's where we really have to go, is to this point. So about 18 years later, that's when the redlining started. And the thing about redlining to understand is that it did not segregate our city. The segregation was already there. And so the segregation was in place, which then permitted these behaviors. So if you're unfamiliar with redlining, I'm assuming most of you are, because this is a real estate group, but just in case we have anyone who's unfamiliar, during the New Deal era, the federal government tried to make homeownership more accessible to everybody. And so we got these really great loans that were really easy to obtain if you were of a certain group. And so, unfortunately, the New Deal era occurred at the same time that the country also had legalized racism, what we call de jure racism. So when they sent underwriters out to cities like Fresno, the way that they appraised neighborhoods, the way that they determined which neighborhoods were the riskiest and which were the most attractive for home loans for investment was to factor in race. And so all that history of Chinatown and racial segregation and industrial zoning resulted in those same areas, Southwest Fresno and even Southeast Fresno, as being marked as what they called too hazardous for home loans. So you get that area west of downtown, right? Marked primarily red. And you can actually look up the reports for those areas that were written at the time, and they'll explicitly mention the racial groups that live there. So this isn't like we're like trying to extract something from coded language. They literally said that it was because of the racial groups who lived there and would use these phrases like they showed no pride in ownership, right? You'll still see that phrase used when you're looking at descriptions of homes that are listed. The areas that were marked best, if you look at the 1940 census data, so right up here, kind of like Old Fig, Fresno City College area, those areas, when you look at the 1940 census data, were almost entirely white. I've actually looked at the 1940 data for this area right here, so green is the best. And there was one person of color, and they were a domestic worker living in that neighborhood. So those sorts of moments, those decisions just cemented what we see today, because that right there was what promoted homeownership and rising value for white homes and lack of homeownership and depreciating values in Black neighborhoods, which are also now neighborhoods where Latinx communities predominantly live as well, Southeast Asian communities predominantly live as well. Okay, so that's our history. So if we keep moving forward in the Fresno timeline, right, this part of Fresno it's only a small part of Fresno now, right? We've grown a lot, we've gone north. So that's where the redlining areas are today. It's predominantly around downtown. So that's a Google map of now. So what has happened since then is we've moved northward, and a lot of things have moved northward with the city. All the new commercial development, all the attractive new housing, right? All that stuff went north. And not everybody went north with it. The people who moved north with all that development, with the hospitals, with the new shopping centers, with all those beautiful new homes, with that suburban life, were white. They were predominantly white. And so I'm actually going to move out of this one. I have lots of maps. If you're not familiar with me, I'm a big map person. And so this is a GIF of white flight in Fresno from 1980 to 2000. So 1980 is about the time that like Kaiser Permanente moved north. You got the Manchester Mall, all that stuff is developing northward. And what you're seeing are neighborhoods where whites were the largest group over time. And so they were the largest group in almost every neighborhood except downtown and West Fresno, but they progressively moved by 2010 to Northeast Fresno, Woodward Park area and into Clovis. Off into Clovis they go. So it's a pretty clear pattern. And if you're wondering if it's just because we become a more diverse community, you can actually see the absolute number of white residents in those neighborhoods dropping as well. So it's not just that their percentage share is dropping, they actually are just leaving, even as the city is diversifying as well as the whole Central Valley did during that time. Okay. So I want to stop at this point before I move any further in. Any questions or reactions to that?
At this point, I don't see any questions.
I see somebody asking about, is it 1990? Is that what you're asking about, Emma?
Oh, you can speak, Emma.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, good afternoon. Yes, my question is, are there any population data of 90s regard to colored group?
Regard to people of color?
Yes.
Yes, that was actually in that image. It went from 1980 to 1990 to 2000 to 2010. So if we're asking about what happened to how redlining has shaped our city today, I can show you some of the consequences that have come out of those decisions that were made now almost 100 years ago. So if we move back in, sorry, it's always awkward going in and out of PowerPoint. So this shows neighborhoods by which racial or ethnic group is the largest group. So the kind of pinkish areas are where the largest group are white residents. The blue areas are where Latinx are the largest group. There aren't really any areas where Black residents are the largest group anymore. There are areas where they are more predominant, but not the largest group. Okay, so what we see here, first of all, are the green areas. You can see the border of the green area and the blue areas in this first map. So the blue and green areas up here in like the sort of like Tower Old Fig area are still predominantly white today, right? There's some blue areas down here that are predominantly Latinx today. And the areas that were marked as yellow and red in 1936 are now almost all areas where people of color are the largest group, with the exception of this one little area right here, where the pink is kind of like where whites are the largest group. So there's a little bit of overlap, but today those red line areas are still predominantly, the residents are still predominantly people of color, meaning for the most part, white residents don't live there. So racial segregation was already in place and exacerbated by these actions that took place back in the 1930s. Okay, so if we look at median home values, because of course, when a neighborhood gets appraised as being hazardous or being best, it's going to have a major impact on home values, how homes get appraised. And appraisals are such a wild beast in the first place. So they can be influenced by these sorts of things. The darker the area, the higher the home values. And so the blue and green areas where white residents also predominate are the areas with the highest home values today. Okay. The areas that were marked as better, but are where people of color predominate, the home values are not as high. In fact, they're in the lowest categories. So race is still a factor as well today. And then here are the areas that were marked as hazardous or, declining. That was what yellow was, declining. And the lighter the color, the lower the home value. So some of the lowest home values are in those areas. Okay, here's home ownership. So the darker the green, the higher rates of home ownership. And you'll see the blue and green areas are pretty dark compared to the surrounding areas. So home ownership was supported. And then if you look especially at the red areas, you'll see a lot of areas where almost nobody's a homeowner in those areas that were marked as too hazardous to be given those loans, those really good loans. All right, so if we talk about other consequences that matter, the other things that end up factoring into housing, because housing is not just housing, right? Housing is related to all these other social issues we care about, like health, education, crime, safety, pollution, wealth. They all overlap now, so that we can't just talk about housing anymore when we talk about housing. We have to talk about all the effects that it has when people are blocked out of homeownership. So if we look at asthma emergency department visits, they're much more prevalent in those areas. In Southwest Fresno, around downtown, along the 99 up here. If we look at cardiovascular, so heart attacks, emergency department visits for heart attacks, more prevalent here. Right. And this is related not just to the lack of economic opportunity, it's related to higher levels of pollution because of that industrial zoning. It's related to all of the disinvestment from those neighborhoods as people move north and as development move north. Okay, if we're talking about COVID, right? Even COVID, even this thing that, as we talk about as affecting us all as a whole, we know that there's inequalities there too that are spatial. So in terms of who's more vulnerable for COVID, it's those same areas, right? So now we're talking about something really serious and new that is killing people today, tied back to housing and segregation. All right, and since I also study evictions, and that's also related to housing, if we look at where COVID cases are highest, those are also areas where we have the highest rates of eviction. So everywhere you see a red dot, there were 10 or more evictions in 2019. And you can see a pretty clear overlap that the same places where people are at risk of displacement are the same areas where they're at risk of COVID. So there's co-vulnerabilities now that all tie back to the lack of opportunity, the various ways that we shut communities of color out, particularly Black and Latinx communities and Southeast Asian as well, from housing and opportunity. It has ripple effects. And again, the things that reinforce it now are not just specific policy moments anymore, it's all the diffuse actors. So the way that we steer white families and upper class families away from these areas, the way developers go northwards and outwards instead of coming inwards to these areas that need the investment. So I don't want to take up too much more time here. So I just want to end by, let me stop my share there so that we're all looking at each other again. I just want to end by pointing to some of the ways that what's things to think about as I'm wrapping up. And really, I just want y'all to think, what role are you playing in all of this? Because again, it's not a specific policy moment anymore. We're all playing a role. And how do we disrupt these patterns, right? What is your role in disrupting those patterns is the question I want to leave you with. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was some great information. It's like a lot to wrap your head around with all of the facts and the data that you presented to us. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to hand over the floor to Michael Jackson.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I had some technical challenges again. Sorry about that. We've had a couple of little dry runs here before the session started today. But again, my name is Michael Jackson. That is my name. I was not named after the entertainer. You can blame my dad from changing my name at birth from Anthony to Michael. But with that said, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored and so great to be a part of this team. One of the things that I did not get a chance to share at the beginning stages of today's presentation is my commitment to California. Was not born and raised here, but was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but moved here in the early 70s due to civil rights in Atlanta, Georgia, and have been a longstanding Californian since that period of time. Grew up in the Bay Area, Oakland, California, to be exact. I'm based in the East Bay market as well, not too far from Oakland, near Berkeley area, but very familiar with all of California, particularly the Fresno County market. I can say that during my years of experience of over 30 years in this business, doing diverse markets, economic development, first-time home buyers, wherever that may have been. It could have been at one of the other banks that I worked for in the past, at Freddie Mac in the past. The focus and the passion for me has always been around commitment to communities, working with underserved communities, low to mod communities, and helping those that are truly in need of purchasing a home. Whether that's been through products and programs, developing new strategies, community development opportunities as well that takes place in various municipalities. But with that said, it's very important to have collaboration. And collaboration is really public and private. So when you have a public-private partnership, it truly drives the marketplace. It drives the commitment of all the partners. And the other part of that too is that it really shows a real true collaboration to the community and that we're trying to serve as well. Now, with that said, I've been here at Union Bank for going on 7 years at this stage right now. And our number one focus in the group that I work under, which is our corporate social responsibility group, is to make sure that those underserved markets are getting the right products, the right banking needs, the right services. So we're not involved in any type of redlining. We're not involved in any type of low performances from any of the regulators that are watching every bank, the watchdog agencies, whether that's the OCC or any of the Federal Reserves as well, that takes place as well. But when we look at Community Reinvestment Act, that's our number one focus from a Union Bank standpoint. It's a federally law that was enacted back in the 1970s, 1977 to be exact, to encourage depository institutions to meet the credit needs of low to moderate income neighborhoods. The CRA, or Community Reinvestment Act, also too requires for federal regulators to assist how each bank fulfill its obligations to those communities. And with that said, we're all regulated. We're all following those guidelines, that we're meeting the needs of those municipalities, those counties, and those governmental agencies. Whether we're bringing in new products and programs, showing some presence in the marketplace by having a local banking institution on site, but also too making sure that we are serving those low to moderate income communities that are so desperately in need. Union Bank has been around well over 150 years at this stage. We have over 300 retail branches in California, Washington, and Oregon. Our residential lending is in Nevada, Arizona, California, Washington, and Oregon. We focus on providing exceptional service from a customer service standpoint, a wide range of products and programs that meets the consumer's needs. We are considered a full service banking institution. We have local mortgage consultants that are based in the Fresno market, in the Fresno County area, and a lot of them on the call today. And also too, Union Bank serves loans that we originate. One of the keys that we really see that's a big market for us at this stage is making sure that we're putting our mortgage clients into the right products. We give them opportunities to choose whether they're going to go into one of our in-house portfolio products, any of our first-time homebuyer products, government loans from an FHA and VA standpoint as well. We do originate that. But our loan officers are very dedicated and focusing on community that we serve and the communities that are in dire need. We're really big on raising awareness. Raising awareness is big in every community. From a Union Bank standpoint, we want to make sure that we're partnering with the right organizations, whether you're nonprofits, government agencies, realtors of Fresno County, and other trade organizations as well to really drive that market. And how do we drive it? It all starts first with education. I think consumers are in dire need of as much education as possible, especially in today's virtual world. Whether that's a certified HUD-approved counseling agency that's providing the virtual, or in some cases, soon to be back to our normal days of in-person counseling and education, to take them through every step of the process. That's so important in today's environment as people are becoming more digitally educated. They're focusing more on the online services of today, but starting from the beginning to the end, meaning understanding what credit looks like, understanding what budget looks like, understanding what those different products and programs that are out there in the communities that needs, or after even from other institutions that are need in your particular community. Helping them understand why it's important to purchase a home from a wealth building and wealth generational standpoint, wealth generational building standpoint. But the most important thing is to walk them through every step and every stage of the process. A lot of institutions and also organizations have, in some cases, gone away from the counseling. The counseling piece has been a major portion of purchasing a home. Understanding how to get through every aspect of the process and know how to get started, how to work with a realtor to show you to go out and look at properties, to know what today's COVID environment looks like, to understand what the process looks like as well as it relates to the new regulations and the rules that are taking place. That's so important in today's world, as well as understanding the importance of becoming mortgage approved or pre-approved. A lot of banks and also from a Union Bank standpoint, we make sure that our clients are following those guidelines and make sure that they understand and hold their hands throughout the entire process. So when you have an educated borrower who really truly understands the entire process, and we walk them through the process along with our counseling groups, but also to understanding what those down payment assistance programs that are out there as well, whether it's the CalHFA program, the GSFA program, or even the Federal Home Loan Bank's WISH program, which is another source of down payment and closing cost grants that are out there available for down payment and closing cost assistance programs. So we want to make sure that people have a true, clear understanding on how that works. And that's why it's so important for that piece to take place. One of the keys that we've been developing and working on through our corporate social responsibility, diverse markets group, and consumer lending is making sure that we are being a little more creative and really shortening that homeownership gap between Black population, Hispanic population, or Latinx, but also too when we look at some of the other groups that are out there too that are also too being disparate against at this point. As the numbers from the Sheba report and the U.S. Census Bureau has reported, there's just a true, it's gone back into the 1960s at this point on where the homeownership gap is sitting right now in today's economy. And we want to work on a different strategy. Our strategy is working directly with government agencies, working directly with those trade organizations, identifying what those needs are, coming up with sustainable homeownership initiatives that truly drive not only the marketplace and the economy of housing and homeownership, but it also creates a sense of accomplishment from those collaborative efforts. With that said, we've worked with the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency in creating a Black homeownership campaign, but it's also community homeownership campaign that goes along with that. The whole goal is to create homeownership for the Black community, and also to understand what are those particular needs are. What was the needs in Sacramento? Lack of down payment assistance program, lack of education, and also too, as we all know, in every community, there's just an inventory problem as well that's out there. Now, we can't control inventory. However, we know that the realtors and other trade organizations are working as closely as possible with NAR and CAR and other organizations to really help create that equal opportunity for those low to moderate income borrowers. This collaborative effort in Sacramento, which is in between the Sacramento Housing Redevelopment Agency, the Federal Home Loan Bank, the Sacramento Realtors Association, now with the City of Sacramento's new Financial Empowerment Center that focuses on credit and counseling and education, along with the Federal Home Loan Bank, if I didn't mention that earlier, as well as Union Bank, created a collaborative effort in which we're creating home ownership initiatives to really drive that marketplace. We've seen tremendous success as it relates to these local initiatives. Now, other institutions or other marketplace partners are doing a number of other type of opportunities as it relates to creating home ownership amongst the Black and Brown communities. We feel that working together, meaning they do educational seminars, they provide specialized products and programs, et cetera. We feel that creating a really truly sustainable homeownership initiative is the key driver, and it creates that community. The community of those key drivers in Fresno is really working with local government, the realtors of Fresno County, other local trade organizations, nonprofits, and really sitting down and saying, hey, you know, what do we really need to focus on? These efforts are really driving success. And it all starts first with education. And that's the biggest key: online education, face-to-face education, and bringing in the right products and programs. Through our partnership with the Federal Home Loan Bank as being a chartered member bank of the Federal Home Loan Bank, we're able to offer the WISH program, which is a matching grant program through the Federal Home Loan Bank. And it's a 4-to-1 match, and you can get up to $22,000 in the form of down payment or closing cost assistance. With that said, too, we've been able to look within our internal channels and look at other opportunities on how we can provide additional assistance for those that are in need for down and closing. So from a Union Bank standpoint, we created what we call the Union Bank Grant. It's a home buyer grant. It allows buyers to take advantage of an opportunity of getting additional assistance for funding. In the Fresno market, we're able to provide up to additional $6,000. For other high cost markets like Los Angeles, the Bay Area, and other places, they can get up to $9,000. But for Fresno, we're looking at the $22,000 from the WISH program, along with the $6,000 from Union Bank. Now you got a borrower that can get up to $28,000 in assistance. Now that helps fulfill the gap. There are eligibility requirements that goes along with the WISH program. One, they have to be at 80% or below area median income. They have to be a first-time buyer as well. And on top of that, too, they have to go through a certification class once they get approved to go through the WISH program. From a Union Bank standpoint, it's still the same. We're looking at buyers, but also, too, it's also focusing on census tract. So if they're buying in an underserved market, in an underserved community, that's very important to make sure that they are in that market as well. And we're seeing this all over the board. I mean, it's all over the United States. People are buying where they can afford to purchase today. They're buying in low income, low to moderate, or even underserved communities. So with that said, you know, you can receive an additional grant to go along with that program in itself. We have, again, loan officers and loan consultants that can go more in detail on each of those specific products and programs. But more importantly, we want to continue to drive those commitments. What are those commitments? I would like to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to go into the MUFG Union Bank website and take a look at under our corporate social responsibilities group. We have created a series of what I call the 11 commitments at this point, commandments. And with that said, I mean, we provide additional support through this guide that's actually online. So if you search Union Bank, MUFG Union Bank, and you actually go to our website under our corporate social responsibility, it focuses on what we're doing for small business lending, what we're doing for, my goodness, residential lending, of course, foundations and grants that goes along with that, and our commitments to a community as a whole. Again, every bank and every financial institution is either regulated either by through CRA or through HMDA. And with that said, HMDA is the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. That's based upon race, ethnicity, gender, sex, etc. At the end of the day, we still have to report our successes, and we have to report our needs of improvements in various areas as well. I'm very happy about the reports of Union Bank. We have either been as satisfactory or above satisfactory in various major categories from the CRA regulators. And we're trying to do the best that we can to try to meet those communities that we serve. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Aisha or Lionel will put that in the chat. But we're very happy about the success of Fresno and bringing this homeownership campaign and initiative in the local marketplace as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for all your contributions and your hard work towards the Realtus Nation. You've been around for a while, and you constantly bring some more information to us that, I mean, it's very useful to us in our chapter as well. So thank you so much for participating with us and being a part of us as well.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to hand it over to our Deputy Mayor, Matthew Grundy.
All right, I really appreciate it. Aisha, thank you all again for sticking around. I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Crowell, who earlier, shared some really good contextual information. I think is really important for us. I want to thank Michael Jackson there for, providing some real tools that can be placed in the hands of each one of us and for us to share with folks whom we touch and know. I'll kind of just start. I want to go back to what Dr. Crowell mentioned a little bit about, the historical context. My wife this morning woke me up and she was on ancestry.com and doing a deeper dive on some things related to her history. And we've learned over time how she's the descendant of some wonderful abolitionists. And we kind of looked into, her background. In fact, this past Sunday, I was actually preaching a sermon looking back at some things related to history. I think history is really important as it ultimately gives us context to the answer to Dr. Crowell's question around what are we doing today? What are we doing today? What are we doing with that information to actually be helpful and, in her words, disruptive towards the cycle that perhaps has come before us? I think that's really an important question to answer. I'll start with a little bit of history on my own, and then I'll share how that backs its way into this role as Deputy Mayor for the City of Fresno and what the City of Fresno is hoping to do to empower and engage residents within the city and beyond. So I'm probably the one of the poster children for economic mobility, frankly, as I, like many of you, have experienced life. Life happens. And for me, life happened when mom got terminally ill and dad lost his job a few years before retirement. And we went poor keeping mom going. And so we're my junior and senior year, we're homeless in high school. I think that was a real eye opener for me. And I think, as a child, you don't quite know what's going on or why, but my dad always taught me hindsight's 20/20. And I think looking back at that experience, I learned that cliche that it takes a village is true in the best sense of the word. It really does take a village. By God's grace, demonstrated through wonderful people like yourselves here, organizations like the Realtus that came around me to help me become educated and have information, as Michael Jackson mentioned earlier, that knowledge is so key for me to be able to understand and to see more and ultimately experience more. To go from homelessness to home ownership was key. And when coming to Fresno, really leaning on that experience, that personal experience, but then seeing the marginalized in our community, the disadvantaged in our community, those who were voiceless in our community, and saying, hey, we've got to do something about this. So my last role was at Habitat for Humanity, where I was CEO there, and really tried to help empower first-time home buyers to build and buy their first home And Dr. Crowell mentioned it really well earlier. She shared some of the unfortunate outcomes that are a byproduct of lack of safe and decent homes and home ownership. And it goes beyond that. I mean, we know that through home ownership, the work that you all are doing, the village, it creates stability for children to learn. It creates it leads to future job opportunities. It helps folks avoid negative health outcomes. And then ultimately, what we know is the biggest thing that was indicated in her maps that she shared was it leads to the transition of generational wealth. That's the biggest thing. And that's why it's so important what each of you are doing. I'm so encouraged by you all. Folks like my friend Sabrina Brown. I see you, Sabrina. Those of you who are helping folks get the keys to their home, they not only change their generation, but future generations. These outcomes are really real. Like, they're really real. It was mentioned earlier, some of the health outcomes for those who live in South Fresno versus those who live in North Fresno. Studies have shown now, if you haven't known, that there's a 20-year delta in life expectancy from those who were born in South Fresno to those who were born in Northeast Fresno. 20 years in the same city. I mean, it's unacceptable, right? And in fact, I'll recommend a tool to you for those of you who are on right now. If you want to see something really cool, visit opportunityatlas.org. That's opportunityatlas.org. I really would love for you to take a look at the Opportunity Atlas. The Opportunity Atlas is essentially a program that was created. It's an interactive mapping system created by the Census Bureau, where we can actually trace the roots of today's affluence and poverty back to neighborhoods where people grew up. You can literally click and type in an address, and it'll zero it down to the census tract, and you'll be able to ultimately see anticipated life expectancy, average amount a person from that specific home will make in their lifetime in income, divorce rates, preterm birth rates, all of it down to the address. So these things are really, really real. And the work of the Fresno Realtist and others in partnership with private entities like Union Bank and others, what we're doing as a village really matters to real lives. And so, I think for me in my role, as I moved on from Habitat here to the city, I really want to say my role moving here was in answer to that question: what role can I play in disrupting the cycle? I believe local government is here to create an environment conducive to economic mobility. And essential to economic mobility, guys, is the presence of choice. Like, choices are only powerful when people have options, right? Like, how can we applaud or celebrate someone or discourage someone else when they make a choice, right or wrong, when the environment in which they're in has no options? So economic mobility fundamentally is traced to choice, and choices are only powerful when there are options. We have to do what we can to create an environment of options. And that's really what I'm hoping to do here in this role as the city of Fresno. Now, Mayor Dyer has done an amazing job. He ran on a platform called One Fresno, where he said, look, One Fresno means bringing everybody together. It means there should not be a disadvantage based on where you live. The options and the opportunity should be available to all. Former Mayor Swearingen did a good job with some of that. With a lot of that, she really kicked it off. I mean, if anyone knows former Mayor Ashley Swearingen, she helped rezone 100,000 parcels in the city, partly due to back what we heard from Dr. Crowell, where folks places were wrongly zoned and not conducive to economic mobility. Now, Mayor Dyer has come in and said, look, we're going to go beyond that. We're going to take that and we're going to carry it further. And part of that was in hiring me and expanding this office to say we want to bridge the community. So with all that being said, the vision for One Fresno is simply this: an inclusive, prosperous, beautiful city where people take pride in their neighborhoods and communities, and a government that listens, keeps its promises, and is owned by the people. I mean, doesn't that sound like good government, right? And with that, Mayor Dyer set forth 6 priorities or initiatives to help us get there. The first of those, which is apropos to this conversation today, is addressing housing and homelessness. So I'll start with the latter. On homelessness, if you've seen it, this city's done not just a good job of historically separating folks and historically segregating folks, but has a history of displacing folks. Instead of displacing, we want to do a good job at placing folks now. So if you've noticed across not just our nation and state, but city, we had this uptick in homelessness. In fact, we had an increase, a 60% increase year over year in homeless folks here in the city of Fresno. And to respond to that, we applied to funding, working with our state. Again, it takes a village, working with the state to secure Project Home Key funding. We leveraged those dollars to produce a program called Project Off Ramp, where we've helped house and place already to date over 250 homeless that many of you saw living up and down our right-of-ways on the freeways, right? The most vulnerable, living in the most risky part of town. We had 3 deaths over a period of 2 weeks where homeless folks rolled down into oncoming traffic and died. We had a public fire responded to 618 fires last year just set by the homeless on our freeways alone. But now if you drive the 41, you'll see there's no more homeless. We acquired hotels on Parkway Drive and on Parkway Ave, and we've been housing our homeless with services and are in the process of acquiring more. We're now working the 168 and the 180, and we'll soon be jumping over to the 99. So just so folks know, that's the priority, is that everyone deserves dignity, value, and an investment. And we're trying to do that with our homeless here. Now, housing, as we wind down, I want to share a bit about what we've done with housing. I know I was on last meeting with you all. We shared that we were launching the ERP program, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And some of you have either participated as owners, property owners, landlords, or have shared that information with your residents or tenants. Just so you know, the program is up in full swing. For those of you who didn't know, the city of Fresno received over $34 million in federal and state government funding to provide housing assistant grants, rental assistant grants, and improve housing stability during these very unprecedented times on the heels of COVID-19. And so the city's partnered with 6 CBOs to provide relief to landlords and tenants. And during that time, we're basically providing support to pay the full amount of rent from the times of April 1st, 2020 to March 31st of 2021. We've prioritized rent arrears for applicants that are below 50% AMI. And that's our first priority. And then we'll be working up from there up to 80. But just so you all know, we've received to date since the program's launched over 4,000 applicant submissions, of which 1,200 of those represent tenants, 953 of those 1,200 of those are tenants only applications, 953 of those are landlord only applications, and the balance are a combination of the two. And so we are actively processing applications. They spread across all districts, all areas of the city. If you are still interested, just go to fresno.gov, and right there on the homepage, you'll see a COVID-19 button, press it, and you'll see a link to the ERAP or the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Beyond that, I would just like to share what's coming with another minute here. Simply that we just completed, it's not just about having access to the programs, but it's about having an environment that's conducive for landlords and tenants to thrive. We just completed, I completed a 30-day assessment on our planning, building, and safety departments as a part of our commitment to remove red tape and roll out red carpet to all folks throughout all of our community, because we know that Fresno has not been known to be the most business friendly and the most developer friendly and over the years. So we're in the process of changing that into a service oriented, we work for you culture. And just so you know, there's some other things that are coming, and I'll defer because for the sake of time back to Aisha, but we have some new things that are coming that are addressing and they're geared towards communities of color, folks who aren't well represented, who haven't had the platform for a voice, such as a recent announcement that we've launched a new Office of Community Affairs that's in the mayor's office. It's being led by yours truly. And we've also launched a recent fund for small businesses, for minority-owned, women-owned small businesses to provide microloans to those businesses. So I can share more about that if we have time, but I want to defer. I just wanted to get some things out on the table to give you an update on where we've been recently, a little reflection on my own personal history, in hopes of encouraging you to keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much for that follow-up. That was great. Thank you for updating us on some of the programs that you shared with us before. And thank you for reaching out to us when it did launch so that we were able to share it with our Realtus family. So make sure that you guys are, if you aren't already following our social media pages, you are doing that. Our Facebook, our website will be launched really shortly as well. So all that information you'll be able to find in the one spot. So thank you so much. That was great. At this point, if you guys have any questions, please type them into the chat. I'm going to share my screen once again as we wrap up. Okay. So if you were able to follow along and have been following along with our social media pages, we were able to do a backpack drive. We partner with schools in the community and do something just like this. So in 2019, we were able to do the backpack drive, and we covered the backpacks for the entire third grade class. They actually challenged us, and we accepted the goal of taking on providing backpacks for the entire school, which we thank you. With your help, we were able to do so. So here are just a few of the photos from when we visited the school on Friday, and we're able to help hand out all of the backpacks to the students along with some masks. We are still collecting funding for supplies, as the teachers are needing some assistance with some of their school supplies. So if there's anyone that is interested in supporting in our backpack drive, please feel free to reach out. We are still collecting funds for that. And I want to take a moment to make sure that we thank all of the contributors that have donated so far. Thank you so much for every bit of your assistance. That it was amazing to be able to go out there. It was nice to hear that the students had not been out in the courtyard area pretty much since the beginning of COVID. So because we came and were able to visit, we were able to bring a little bit of sense of normalcy to their day, where they were able to come out to their little playground area space and actually get to see some of the other students. So that was nice. And we are going to be preparing for our next event. We'll keep you guys in the loop with the date and time for that, but we are preparing for a lender panel, and you're more than likely to see some of our sponsors that will be on that panel with us as well. I'm going to hand it right back over to you, Lionel. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we close out?
I just want to thank all our panelists for this amazing, their just breadth of knowledge, right? I mean, we just learned a lot on this event here today, from Dr. Crowell to Michael Jackson and Mr. Grundy, of course. And it's just great to have leaders in the community that can speak to the struggle, and having those leaders on this call and be able to provide what they're doing in their specific fields and how they're making change in this community. It's just a great sight for all of us. And so it provides and challenges us individually to be involved and do what we can to be a part in the change. So with that, I just want to thank everybody so much for their participation. Our Realtus chapter is grateful, really, really grateful for all that you all do. We really are. And that's it for me. And I want to thank our board, thank Aisha for putting this up together. And we're just look forward to our next event, and we can't wait to have all of you. And I do want to go and pass it on to our chaplain, Mitch Shaw, to close us out in prayer.
I really would like to keep it simple and just say shalom to everybody here. Just may the peace of God be with you. Shalom. Amen.
Shalom.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you all. Yes, thank you guys all for joining us. I hope you guys have a great, productive week this week, and we will see you all soon. Bye.